Greetings from the Long Island Sound podcast. Welcome to the show. Please rate, review, and comment on the show, and call our listener line and leave a message for our guest. Dial 631-800-3579. All right, enjoy the show. Welcome to the Long Island Sound podcast, where we explore the muse and music from the North Shore to the South Shore, from New York City to the Hamptons, on the island of Long here in New York. I'm Steve Yusko from gigdestiny.com. Stay tuned as we explore the Long Island Sound. This is a really wonderful podcast with my good friend Kevin McLeod. I tell you, you're in for a real treat. If you believe in the transformative power of music, you got to hear Kevin's music. Kevin is an absolute cross-pollinator between blues, jazz, folk, and his rock influences. We're going to hear a couple of his original songs. The first one here is Sacred Place, a beautiful song from his latest album, and the second one is Nobody's Friend. And we kind of break down his process and his take on the Long Island Sound. So stick with us. I think you're really going to enjoy it. Hey everybody, I'm really excited to be here with, believe it or not, an old friend from high school named Kevin McLeod. One of the first guitarists that I met in high school and said, wow, this guy really knows what the hell he's doing with a guitar. And I've been enamored by that ever since. We reconnected. We don't live very far from each other on Long Island. And I tell you, if I read Kevin's whole bio, it'd probably take up the whole podcast episode. So I'm going to kind of go over a few things. The Kevin McLeod Band plays original rock music. And he has a separate band called the Tone Healers that plays original jazz composed by Kevin himself and other band members. And they also do some jazz classics. We're going to hear a few of his songs from the Careless CD. Those are rock songs that the Kevin McLeod Band plays. Now, what's interesting about Kevin has a foot in a band on Long Island and also has a foot in New York City. So it's an interesting bridge between the two areas. So we're going to kind of talk about that. I believe what Kevin believes, that music really does have a transformative power in our world. I think it has the power to heal, the power to enlighten us to social justice issues. We'll talk about that. And we'll talk about, what happened on Long Island and kind of give our impression of the Long Island Sound. So whether it comes to blues, jazz, folk, or rock influences, this guy's got it all. So I want to welcome my good friend, Kevin McLeod. Welcome, Kevin, to the Long Island Sound.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks for that introduction. It's nice to chat with you about music here tonight.
Yeah, so Kevin and I were talking early, and I look at it as two bees talking. Me, the wannabe, a musician, falling way short, and the worker bees that we meet on the Long Island Sound. And man, you're a worker bee. You got a lot accomplished in the decades that you've been playing. So let's kind of roll it back, Kevin. Just kind of give me, when did you first pick up an instrument? What were your influences to say, hey, I want to play and sing and write? Where did it all begin for Kevin?
Well, for me, it all began, same place, you were in high school, right, Steve?
Yeah.
I think we were in high school I may be prejudiced, but I think of the 1970s as kind of like a golden age for recorded music and rock music in particular.
Right.
Because you had the end of singer-songwriter, progressive rock, people were doing everything. But then you also had punk rock and new wave starting end of the 70s into the 80s. So there was just so much exciting music around. And when I first started playing in high school, I bought an acoustic guitar. You know, I loved Neil Young and Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, and hey, Stairway to Heaven had that great acoustic guitar opening, right?
Yeah,
So
sure.
um, I loved all that music, and you know, I also was listening to the Who and Led Zeppelin and Yes, and you know, I got into electric guitar soon afterwards.
Nice.
And you know, from there, I wanted to you know, to perform a bit.
Now
I
I
think
gotta
you
ask.
actually probably were there for both of my first public performances, Steve, at our junior show. I remember playing it soon.
Oh
And then I
God.
had a band by the senior show, and we played a
Yep.
bunch of tunes. So,
Yeah, we'll go into that senior show nightmare. I still have nightmares about it, but not with your performance. But I think we could do a whole podcast on the senior show. It was just the acts were good, but it was a freaking train wreck from what I remember. But so did you come from a? So we talked about the radio influence and the people that we both enjoy, Neil Young and what have you. But did you come from a musical family? Were you the only one? Do you have, like, for me, I have sisters who are a decade older than me. So I had their record collection to steal from because they would lock it in their rooms. And for those who don't know, we had things called vinyl and records that we used to play until we wore the needles out on our phone, our turntables. So did you come from a musical family, Kev?
I did not. And
Hmm.
let's see, I had an older sister, but she was really not into music. So, and some two younger sisters as well. But I was kind of the one who was somewhat musically adventurous and listening to more than you know, whatever was on the radio in terms of AM pop music back in the day.
Right.
So I would be bringing home the records that my parents would object to, and I would find eminently fascinating.
Nice, nice. Yeah, you know, it's interesting. We were, so we both graduated high school in 1979, and it was a golden age. It was really the golden age of FM radio, really. We had WLIR on Long Island that back in the day, the DJs would pick their own songs to play, and they each had a character about their shows. So there was that freedom of getting to new listening experiences. And I almost liken it to, I listen to WFUV radio, the Fordham radio station, because I think it's great that I can't even listen to pop music. No offense to the pop music lovers out there. It's just, I can't chew bubblegum anymore either, so, so that's what kind of ties into it. So you don't? Okay, so there's hope for the up-and-coming singer-songwriters that don't come from a musical family. Did you jump in? Did you take lessons? Were you self-taught, Kev? Like, how did that go?
I think a bit of everything. I back in high school, I certainly taught myself a few things, but I did study with someone for a year or two who taught me, you know, kind of basics of reading some music, also
Oh,
the basics of guitar playing, both in a folk, you know, acoustic kind of picking context and electric guitar. And that educational background. That was really all I had as a musical education, and that
hmm.
held me for a number of years until, you know, again going back to the types of music that were available. I mean, I was into progressive rock, which got me into jazz fusion that was happening at the time. That
Wow.
got me into more traditional jazz. And the deeper I got into more complex music, the more I wanted to demystify it and figure out how it worked and how to play it. And at that point, I studied with someone else who taught me more about, you know, voice leading and the way scales and chords work and more complex music theory and harmonic theory. And then that was the education that kind of was able to take me into writing and playing jazz as well as rock.
I find interesting is a lot of people will talk about their skill on their particular instrument, and for us novices out there, the development of the ear is really important. Did that come easy to you, or as far as knowing where you were with pitch and what have you?
No, I think there's a couple of things that go on there. I mean, certainly developing your ear is important in terms of even getting a knack for, let's say, phrasing.
Okay.
I'll say this, after playing in rock bands for X number of years, when I first started playing jazz, I think it took me a couple of years really to kind of relax into the kind of phrasing that you do when you're improvising in jazz as opposed to a rock band,
Hmm.
because the swing feel is totally different than a rock feel, or the different kind of grooves you might have in a rock band or funky feel or whatever.
Right.
I think that's kind of what takes more time. And another thing that I think when thinking about music, I think people pay or overemphasize maybe sometimes technical aspects, whether it's the technical aspects of actually operating your instrument or
Okay.
even the technical aspects of understanding music and theory and what to play when. Because the third part of the picture is what music is all about, which is communication, right, Steve?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
And that's like a separate thing in itself. How do you dig deep inside yourself and pull something out that you can translate and share via your instrument? And that's kind of the third part of the discipline.
That's interesting. You know what? I always I'm amazed at, and it's kind of looking at a movie the second or third time around, almost like binge watching when I watch musicians play together, particularly those who have that vibe between them. And my curiosity goes like, how the hell are these guys communicating? Like, it's a look, it's a nod, it's okay. Billy, he's going to run with this right now. It's got to be very different from with jazz as opposed to rock, as far as you know when the solo's coming up. Jazz, and I'm totally ignorant. So when it comes to jazz, so you're going to help educate me and others on this podcast. But I heard it said, and I can't attribute who it is. It was a famous guitarist who says, it's where you start, and it's important where you end up. But in between, that's where the magic kind of lies. So it's
And
interesting to
that's
watch.
definitely true, Steve. And both depending on the type of, rock music you play or even folk music or, country music, there's bluegrass. There are improvisational aspects to all the different styles of music.
Mm-hmm.
Jazz, obviously, the most heavily improvisational. And in all of those contexts, sometimes, there's an agreement, right, before you start playing over what the form is. We're going to play the melody, then we're going to, take turns improvising over these chord changes, or maybe we're going to do something else and take it out, or maybe the form is going to be more open-ended. Um, but I would say the best and the most magical aspects of when you're improvising are kind of like what you said before, where sometimes it's just, a nod or a look. You can get into places where, with musicians you know really well, where not even that happens. Everybody just kind of knows and recognizes through the collective music that's being creative where to go next, that's going to make it the best, right? That's going to continue that conversation that's going on.
So what's interesting is you have this conversation going on about, about in between band members, and for me, for the audience to kind of watch that. I'll give you an example. And I always like plugging other guys. Mike Nugent, who needs to teach me a lot more on guitar. He was doing I requested Dave Mason, and he was just playing with another acoustic guy named Jim Small in a small pub, a few months ago, and he took it in a totally, to me, an unsuspected direction. Maybe he knew where he was going, maybe he didn't, and I was just smiling to myself because I was like, wow, I didn't expect that. It was absolutely beautiful, and I think that's where the music heals the world, in my opinion. That's where it brings a smile. It's giving me goosebumps now. It's not kind of wacky, and I'm not on any medication right now.
It's not wacky. I mean, that is the beauty of music, and to me, that's what I love too. About if I do hear a band playing a piece that I know, I love it when they take it in an unsuspected direction, or if they start to improvise on it, and that goes someplace that might be unexpected, or it might be expected, but just the phrasing and the beauty of what's happening, grabs me, and I can appreciate that.
Yeah, what's interesting too is, and you'd probably know more of the composers who will go outside a typical chord structure and take something that, wow, I don't know where to go with that, and it comes out. So Paul McCartney has been like that, taking a chord structure to a different. Steely Dan, certainly, and I think that's where it's really kind of magical. And I'm going to give you the anti. I'll play devil's advocate. The formulated music scene, whether it's American Idol, you can predict where they're going to go with things, and meeting the expectations of the marketplace is sad to me. It's sad to me. It becomes kind of here we go again. David Grohl talks about that. Give me the garage band who experiments and puts their emotion and their guts and their every fiber into their music and into their chops and woodshedding it and getting it done and then taking it somewhere else. That's the smile that I see between musicians, which is kind of cool. Hey, I'm running out of breath. We're going to take a short break here, Kev. And when we come back, I want to kind of touch, you're in like all these different bands. So I want to give each one their cred. Tell me how the Tone Healers and, how the Kevin McLeod band came about. So when we get back, let's talk about Kevin's musical adventures. So stick with us. We'll be right back.
Hi, Steve Yusko from Gig Destiny here. Well, as you're probably listening to this podcast, you're probably thinking about that musician who would make a fantastic guest here on the Long Island Sound. Well, we'd like to hear their story. We'd like to hear their music. So have them reach out to us at gigdestiny.com and we'll explore their craft. Now, back to our podcast.
Welcome back, everybody. This is Steve Yusko with Gig Destiny, and if you're joining us in the beginning of the middle of the podcast, we're here with my good friend Kevin McLeod, and Kevin, I looked at your bio and I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing, kind of cool stuff. Tone Healers, the Kevin McLeod band, True to Life. Kind of give me a lay down. So, and we touched upon this earlier, and I really think you have a foot in New York City and a foot on Long Island. So, tell me where it began with the bands that you have your signature on.
Well, as you kind of noted there, I have very diverse influences. And whereas some people kind of like stay in, whatever particular music they start out in or wherever they make their first contact, whether it's rock or maybe the acoustic scene or jazz, I've kind of always liked all of those different areas of music. And because of that, I've kind of gigged and recorded in all of those different areas of music also. And I lived in New York City for about 7 years. So my first New York City jazz band, which was True to Life, and I still make music with those guys from time to time, both gigging and doing recordings. That band was started while I was living in New York City.
Okay.
And that was a very interesting band because back in the early 90s, when we were gigging quite a bit, and opening up for some named people and playing some of the bigger places in New York City, there used to be a magazine called Musician Magazine that was like the cool magazine at the time. And every year they would kind of have a big thing about, who the 12 best unsigned bands were, and thousands of bands would submit recordings. And True to Life was named one of the 12 best unsigned bands back in those days.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
It's nice to get that accolade, yeah.
So that's where kind of like the jazz and the jazz funk thing came in a lot through that band. When my wife and I moved back to Long Island, after starting our family, and I've always been working a full-time job while I've been doing all of this too.
Right. And raising a family, yeah.
Yeah, at that point I started playing in, different bands on Long Island, as well as every now and then doing a New York City gig, and then both playing jazz, and I got into playing acoustic guitar and doing acoustic guitar gigs with one of the guys from the jazz band who also wrote songs and wrote music. And we eventually released a CD, my buddy Phil DeStefano, as DeStefano and McLeod, and that was around 1999 when not just CDs, but the internet was first starting to take off.
Right.
And we were so pleased because, we released this CD, and it was at a time where we really could contact all these like NPR and independent stations, and they were very receptive. We got a lot of airplay from that particular recording.
Oh, that's great. It's
Yeah.
such a different world now when it comes to that. It seems to be a jungle of stuff. I mean, the business has changed. You can be the artist, the producer, the mixer, and everything, and put it up in a matter of minutes, literally. But it can get lost in the shuffle too, and we can go into the Spotify that gives 0.004 cents for a stream that's played and robs the musicians of their due and their income, which not to get on the negative. And that's why I like the idea of a podcast. It's a way for us to explore, what's behind the curtain, so to speak, in how you approach things and feature some songs. So that's exciting. So you have these guys now. You're on Long Island. So what developed on Long Island?
So on Long Island, like I said, I was playing in a jazz group on Long Island that played both standard, some of my music. We played some of the restaurants, the different festivals and stuff throughout the course of the year. And eventually me and the other guitar player broke off. We recorded that more acoustic, folk-oriented CD.
Okay.
And following that, I got more into thinking about a lot of songs that I was writing at the time that I thought were going to have a little bit of a harder sound, as well as the fact that my buddy Phil, who I was gigging with at the time, he and his wife moved to Chicago. So
Wow.
at that point, my partner was gone, and I was like, well, maybe I'll just go into the studio by myself, and I'll get a good drummer and bass player, and I'll get these songs recorded. And that's
Sure.
what I did for my first Kevin McLeod CD called The Road Home. That features Alan Proda, a really great local bass player, and John Michelli, who was Meatloaf's drummer for years and years and years. He also played
Wow.
with Blue Oyster Cult and Richie Blackmore's Rainbow. Great, great drummer.
Nice.
So that was my first CD. After that, I eventually did a second CD, Careless Truth, that you're going to play some songs off of. I played lead guitar in the Kathy Flashman Band for about 3 or 4 years in New York City and on Long Island. We recorded a
Wow.
CD together. And I did a bunch of other, projects for other people where I would contribute guitar parts.
Oh, that's great. You know what? An observation. So, what I find interesting about your career is the collaborative spirit that you have in working with these different bands and different people. And, maybe it's a happenstance, meeting different people. But I think as I talk to musicians, and not to categorize them, but there are some that are not very collaborative and some that are very collaborative. And I think that when you put yourself out there and expose yourself to different circumstances of playing in different groups, man, it's got to enrich your music. Question for you. Yeah, let's talk about writing songs for a minute. So the songs that you've written, do you work with another lyricist in most cases? Is it all you as far as lyrics and music? What comes first? That famous question I always ask. How does it happen for you, Kevin?
It's all me. I tend to write the lyrics and the music.
All right, so you're selfish. Okay,
I am.
Got that. All right.
Check.
All right. So if you haven't realized, Kevin's the total diva, and I just wanted to point it out. No, joking. Go ahead. All right. So it's you.
Yes, and I tend to think of my songs almost as little movies, Steve. I mean, if you listen to enough of them, you'll eventually kind of notice that they are either a character study, or I'm trying to make a point about something, or maybe I'm telling a different type of a story. But I try to within 3 or 4 minutes paint a vivid picture about something. That's always my goal.
Okay, gotcha. So let me ask you, the early songs that you had written, and I've spoken to people about this. A lot of times people will go through an evolution of writing in the first person, writing directly about their experiences, and some don't. Some evolve to, researching and speaking outside of themselves and through their observations of other people. Did you go through that sort of period, or was it more mixed up for you?
I would say it's always been more mixed up,
Okay.
and even today, I could write something that's very personal, or by the same token, I could read something or meet someone else and be so taken by a conversation, or again, like I said, something that I've read, someone I've met, that will spark an idea,
Hmm.
and a song will come out of that.
So, all right. So you're working full time, obviously. Still, the muse strikes you. How do you capture that muse, so to speak? Um, do you talk into your iPhone and list something, hum a melody, and go back to it? I know it's probably different every time, but I'm just curious about your method.
iPhones are great for this, Steve. You can ask my wife. Before iPhones, I constantly had like little pieces of paper, in my pockets, because in the course of a day, if like, sometimes you just get an idea for a line. You're like, oh, what a great line that is. You got to write it down
Sure.
someplace so that you remember it. Write it, collect them all later on. So I used to constantly have like a million papers with lines or phrases or scribbled on them. Now I either talk into my phone or I use the notepad feature in my phone, and I'm constantly throwing in a line or two, or maybe a whole verse will come to me, or I'll think of something, and that'll give me ideas for continuing something that's already been started.
Yeah, I know. I use the iPhone as well. I'll hit the record feature, and I'll throw on a phrase. I'll say idea for this, and I'll knock it out. Um, a lot for me happens in the car. Maybe because I'm isolated and looking at something. I just This is going to sound weird, but when I used to drive to my other job in the past couple of years, and I wrote this down. I got to write a song about it. Maybe you can do the music for it if I let you, or maybe I'll do it all by myself. I don't know. Maybe I'll take a page out of the Kevin McLeod book.
There you go.
So I'm driving along on Route 110, middle of the Long Island, for those who don't know, and there is a tree growing out of the sewer grate. It's really like a big weed, but to me it looks like a tree. And I'm just looking at it and saying, "There's a story there. There's a story there. And there's a lyric." So I just want to public notice that this is my idea. No one can steal it,
Too
and
late,
that's
Steve. I
that.
just started writing it down.
So it's. I tell you, we're the light is at the end of the tunnel with COVID. In my opinion, maybe I'm just very hopeful and optimistic. But one of the things that I experienced, at least from a poetry and creative writing aspect, was, they talk about the great retirement, right, in the news. People
Right.
saying, hey, I've had enough of commuting into the city. I'm not doing that again. I'm going to change my life. If there's a silver lining to what has happened over the past couple of years, it's that look into smelling the roses and writing some things down and getting in that creative process. Uh, and by the way, I am totally guilty of having probably 2,000 iPhone snippet recordings that I haven't acted on. Few I have. But I've also, just like you, Kevin, where I was in Baltimore once and something really struck me. I happened to see this choral group in a poor African American church in western Baltimore that was just one of the most joyous places I had ever been. I was so struck by that. I asked my wife Debbie, I'm like, look, can you drive? Because I just got to I got to write this down while it's fresh. And I built it out. It turned out to be just a little blog that I wrote, but I still go back to it. And it's just kind of hit me. It's like I got to remember this. I got to put it out before
And
my mind
sometimes you
goes.
do have to do that in the moment, right? Because you don't want to
Yeah,
you don't want to lose the feeling. In fact, you don't want the feeling to be like reminiscing about the feeling. You want to be like get right to the meat of it while you've still got it, right? And express
right.
that.
Right, and that's the complications I think that we have. So I think the iPhone obviously is a blessing and a curse. It can be that great tool if you use it the right way to capture these things, but it can also be a distraction when that you got to turn off the notices. As far as the message, the text you get or the reminder that you get that. I don't know. Maybe I have ADD. It kind of just, hey, look, squirrel. Oh, okay, forget it. It's totally gone. So it's interesting. Now, have you done songs? Have you collaborated with other people as far as lyrics go, or more on the music side of it?
Um, for most of my songs, I've written the music and the lyrics. Like maybe
Okay.
years and years ago, I collaborated a little bit with some friends. On the jazz stuff, again, mostly I write by myself, but the True to Life band, my New York City band,
Okay.
we write a lot as a group where the communication is almost telepathic. We don't even say what we're going to play, what key we're going to play in, what chords we're going to play. We just start playing. And as soon as something cool happens, we all look at each other and we're like, okay, that's part of a section. And we'll keep going. And as soon as something else happens that we recognize, okay, that's the B part of this. And eventually we put it all together and, organize it into a tune.
The analogy that I use when it comes to music or the development of music has a lot to do with food and kitchens and recipes. And, hey, we've all, maybe not all, but we have the experience where, some relatives come into the kitchen, everybody knows their part, and somehow they put it all together, and the sauce comes out great that day,
Right.
Not always, but it's interesting to have that instinctual relationship, and it's one of those things that are pretty magical. I'll tell you just a short thing, and by the way, Steve Yusko, the host, is a total amateur, lousy guitar player, and probably a pretty bad singer, because for years I tried to sing like Neil Young till my wife straightened me out. And anyway, in any group, even a new group, when everyone's trying to find their footing and influence or help each other, it can be a messy situation. We had that with our little church group, where very good intentions, but you had to realize how to deliver the message. We had a drummer, this guy Rob, great. He had an ear for vocals like you wouldn't believe. We had a group of ladies, a mom, a daughter who could sing harmonies, and it just kind of came together. And he became like their tutor, in a way. And it was just we all look forward after a period of time to say, you know what, this is the Wednesday night practice is the best part of my week, because I'm learning, I'm contributing, I'm flubbing. We're laughing, and we're making magic. It's kind of cool.
Definitely. When it works, when you have that chemistry with other players, it's never something to take for granted, because it's definitely special.
Right. One question. Did you allow the drummer to write any music?
Yes.
Oh, wow. Okay. So that is pretty magical. Hey, listen, when we come back... what song are we going to hear, Kevin?
Sacred Place.
Sacred Place, and that's on
the Careless Truth CD, and all my music is out. Both whether it's Spotify or Apple Music, all the digital download places, as well as there are CDs around even for people who still purchase physical copies of things. Great,
and we'll for those who are listening to this podcast, you'll see links to get in touch with Kevin. You'll see direct links to hear his music on Spotify and all the platforms. It'll be right there at your fingertips. And when we come back, after the short break, we're going to listen to one of Kevin's original songs. It's going to be a treat. Stay with us. Welcome back, everybody. This is Steve Yusko from GigDestiny.com and the Long Island Sound Podcast. I'm here with Kevin McLeod. And Kevin, why don't you introduce your song that we're going to hear next?
This is a tune off of my Careless Truth CD, and it's called Sacred Place.
Wonderful. All right, let's have a listen.
I go down to a sacred place, prepare the ground in a sacred place. I wait for you in a sacred place, 'cause love is true in a sacred place. I reach for you in a sacred place. I breathe with you in a sacred place. I laugh with you in a sacred place. I linger in a sacred place. You can tell me all I need to know. I need to know you. We start with go down to a sacred place. I spin around in a sacred place. I free this joy in a sacred place. I sing in a sacred place. I sing in a sacred place. I sing in a sacred place.
Wow, that was really great, Kevin. You know, I was talking to Robert Miller the other day, an older gentleman, a bass player out of New York City, and he was lamenting about how people aren't writing about social justice issues and stories. You know, they're almost avoiding it to offend, whatever audience. And I'm just talking about the celebrity musicians out there. We know a lot that, from our era that are not afraid to speak up. So in listening to your music, I was happy to hear that you address the issues of homelessness and politics and addiction and depression, as well as the happier moments in life. So tell us a little bit about how the song came to you and how it came together.
Sure. Well, this particular song, Sacred Place, it started out as kind of a love song, but I like to write on a couple of different levels, and sometimes I'll have different inspirations also. So while it started out as a kind of, more romantic love song, I really love the poetry of Persian poets like Rumi and Hafiz. And they wrote these ecstatic love poems that you read them and you're like, well, are they writing to their lover, or are these prayers, to the Creator? And they're both, really. Right. So I kind of took that as inspiration to broaden the perspective of the song, and also because of the title, just thinking about how expansive love can be. That it's not just between people, but it's all of creation. It's this planet we're on. It's this whole existence that we're so lucky to be a part of, right?
Yep. It's interesting, and what comes to mind, and just what you were talking about. I'm just going to tell you about I was doing an alarm survey in Hicksville, and it was for and I don't remember the tradition, but it was an Indian-based temple. And they were taking over an old Jewish temple. It was pretty neat. And the head guy comes in, all wonderful people. I mean, just so gracious. And they had this practice of touching the person they greet's foot in like homage. And I saw this, and this is, wow, so it's so foreign to me. So I said, I have to ask. I said, I'm not of your tradition. What does that mean? And they basically said, we're honoring the God that's within you, within the other person. And that's the sacred place, right? So
yes.
I think, and it's those type of things where we recognize the humanity in everyone, the sacred place in other people, that can move our perspective to make the world a little bit better place. So, and that's where I tie it back to music. Music is a great reminder of how I should be and how I should recognize things. So I'll get off the pulpit here, but it's just, it's important. It's important what you do, Kevin, and how it strikes people, and you never know where it's going to strike. But I would say...
Yeah, thank you. And this is one tune too. At the moment, there's a very nice lyric video out there on YouTube, directed by our buddy John Hamlin.
Oh, this is where we plug John? Did he send you the money?
Yeah, this is checks in the mail. But we did quite a lot of film footage the day that we were together about 2 years ago, and we got enough footage for John to do a pretty cool full video, with me doing some poor lip syncing for Sacred Place too. So I think in the next few weeks that should be out and available on YouTube.
So that's John Hamlin, correct?
correct. The John Hamlin. Yeah, he's been doing very well. I mean, he's got a couple of films that have gotten high praise in different film festivals. So I'm very happy for him, and that he's found time in between all of that work to work on my little music video.
Give me a little bit more behind the curtain when it comes to, okay, you've got the whole album written. You've got it kind of laid out where you want to go with it. Where do you take? Are you recording this yourself on Logic Pro, or are you going to a studio? This might be, tell me about that process for you, at least.
Sure. I actually have a studio right here on Long Island in Central Islip called Cloud9 Recording. And that's my favorite place to record. It's run by two brothers, Jack and Joe Napoli. I've done both of my CDs there. I've worked on some other folks' music there as well. And I would say that for me, what makes, any studio, and in particular, why I like to work at that studio so much, is not just the technical aspects, right, are addressed with real expertise, but on a personal level, they kind of really take the time to get into what's your project about, what's this, what's going on, where are you coming from, what message are you going to deliver here. Wow. And they really create a very creative environment for musicians to work in. So
nice, yeah, because that's part of it. You have to be in that environment where you're going to make the magic, and being
that's
comfortable.
It.
And,
truly.
And just somebody having interest in that makes you want to perform and be your best. I think maybe just a little bit, but that's great. That's
because being
cool
in a
stuff.
studio can be, intimidating sometimes. So anything that is making you comfortable, and not just comfortable, but so that you really kind of get in the zone and can create something out of the ordinary, that's to be valued.
Yeah, because you're almost like in a lab setting. With the microphones and what have you. And I can imagine a new singer-songwriter coming into that environment. You got people in a booth watching everything, checking levels, and I'm wondering, do you turn away towards the wall so you don't see them grimace, when you when they don't like what they're hearing. So anyway, I'm totally making this up. I have no idea. I'm not allowed in a music studio to record anything, and that's why I'm doing podcasts right here from my home, because I have full control. So that's that.
So you're a control freak, if that's what you're saying, Steve?
Well, absolutely. When my wife's not home, and then when she's home, she's in charge. Did I say that nicely? Yeah, she helps. She puts the guidelines up, and she's funny. A quick another story. So the first time I played in public, I was singing Forever Young. And I didn't know about using a capo properly, so you're singing in the key that's sweet to your vocal cords.
Right.
And I heard from the kitchen, "You're not, Neil, you're not Bob Dylan. There's something wrong." And she would, and I'd be horrified, and I'd grimace and say, "Damn it, she's right." And then I finally found the right key. I spoke to Steve Martino, who's a good friend of mine, said, "Yeah, you really need to be here. That's your kind of sweet spot." And he pointed to the parking lot. No, only kidding. But it was fun. And getting out there for the first time, and I wasn't a young fella. I was scared to death because I was in front of people and by myself and my guitar. But I pulled it off. And
as a vocalist, that's important, kind of finding, what is your vocal range, where you are most resonant, what notes can you hit that are going to sound good as you reach for them, and it's different for everybody.
Yeah, and what I guess, and we found this, I found this out, another person in our group was a church group, they try to emulate what they hear on the radio or on a recording, and that may not be the place to be for your voice. So,
yep.
Lesson learned for Steve Yusko. By the way, I will not be coming out with any CDs in the near future, so you can all relax. So
because vinyl is the thing now, right? You got a vinyl record coming out, Steve?
Yeah, vinyl record coming out. It's a 78, so it won't be able to be played on too many places. But we're going to take one more break. When we come back, we're going to hear another one of Kevin's original songs. then I'd also like to talk about places that you've played, some of the unique places, and then got a couple more questions for you. So, hey, everybody, I hope, I know you're getting a lot out of this, and I thank Kevin for this. So hang on, we'll be right back. Welcome back. I'm here with Kevin McLeod. This is Steve Yusko from Gig Destiny. As you know, you've probably heard 13 times already through this podcast. And Kevin is going to introduce another one of his songs. So set it up, as they say, Kev.
This is a song called Nobody's Friend, also from the Careless Truth release.
And that's your latest album, correct?
Yes, it is.
All right. Take a listen.
Shadow, no name, no wrong and no right, no end to this night. Topsiders don't know the dark currents below. When you fall through the cracks, there ain't no going back. It's a long way down, but I've reached the end. A long way down, but I've reached the end. A long way down, but I've reached the end. And now I'm nobody's friend. I'm nobody's friend. I'm nobody's friend. Nobody's friend. No trail, no trace. No family, no face. Regret menaces here in these tunnels of fear. And all needle consoles the torn shell of my soul. A few stitches and then it pulls together again. It's a long way down, but I've reached the end. A long way down, but I've reached the end. A long way down, but I've reached the end. And now I'm nobody's friend. I'm nobody's friend. I'm nobody's friend. I'm nobody's friend.
And we're back. Hey, Kevin, thanks so much for that song for me. Really kind of, no pun intended, hits home. So kind of talk about it and how this came about.
Yeah, well, I've lived in New York City for about 7 years. I've worked in New York both either for my day job or playing gigs for, many more years than that.
Mm-hmm.
So I've seen, I guess, the way that we don't necessarily always take care of each other so well, right, Steve?
Right.
And then I read a book by a woman named Jennifer Toth called The Mole People.
Okay.
And basically it was about a whole series of experiences she had going into the subway tunnels and spending time with different homeless populations that live in the subway tunnels of Manhattan.
Mm.
And that really inspired the song. In fact, there was one quote where she was, talking to one group of people, and she was kind of making the observation that, well, at least it seemed like there was some kind of community there.
Mm-hmm.
And one guy said to her, hey, that's not necessarily the case. It's rough down here. I'm nobody's friend. And that stuck with me then and became the title of the song.
It's interesting. I happen to live with two women who are my inspiration for social justice. One's my daughter, Faith, and the other is my wife, Debbie. And my daughter, Faith, who worked in Western Baltimore, she lived in intentional community after college. And that's where you're not the suburban white kids going to save the poor neighborhood, but you live as the neighborhood lives. And she had a life-altering experience. And one of the things I picked up from her that ties into this is that a person who's homeless may not hear their own name for a long time. And if, you may not want to give somebody money. Everyone deserves food and warmth and a kind word. Just asking what's your name and introducing yourself and engaging somebody is the simplest of blessings that you can give out to people, to say, hey, you mean something. I called you by your name has a lot of biblical references, but when you think about it, for those who feel I have no name, I'm just another, guy on the street, trying to survive. Just ask them their names,
That's a really profound point, Steve. Really true.
Yeah. So it's simple. A lot of people wonder, oh, what can I do? I'm afraid of them, my children. Hey, you know what? You can engage somebody, and you can always walk away, right? But that's a simple thing. Let's talk about some of the places you played. I mean, some of the things. I'm going to go down the list here if you don't mind. So you were on Wes Houston Presents, which is great, and I'd love to get Wes on the show someday. But you played in New York City clubs, the Way Station, the Shrine, Sidewalk, Sylvana, is that correct?
Sylvana, yeah, that's another place uptown.
Google's Lounge. What was that like?
Yeah, Googie's Lounge. That was upstairs at
Googie's.
the living room.
I'm reading Google's Lounge. I'm like, wow, you played for Google.
Yeah, that was down in the East Village. The living room was the larger space downstairs, but they had the smaller space upstairs where they would, have smaller acts or acoustic people play. And I would go in there and do acoustic gigs. It was a fun place to play.
Nice. You played in CBGB's, which is a shithole from what I understand as far as a building goes, but very famous.
Very famous, yeah.
How was that experience?
And they had another space next door that we played as well.
So the dressing room was really cool, from what I understand?
I don't know about really cool, Steve.
Oh, no, it's really cold.
Really filled with crazy graffiti and smelling kind of bad. That would be more accurate.
Okay, all right. So do you have...
let's say...
Yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead. I cut you off.
I was just going to say, with True to Life, we used to play two places up in Harlem that I liked a lot. Sylvana and the Shrine was a great place to play. I mean, any night of the week you could see diverse music from different bands, all great, up at the Shrine, which is like 134th Street and Adam Clayton Powell Boulevard.
Wow.
With my current band, jazz group, the Tone Healers, in the summer we have a residency at Tappan Beach in Seacliff by
yes,
the
I've seen
little
those videos.
restaurant there.
Okay.
And that's wonderful. We play every Tuesday night, beginning the first weekend in June, ending the last week in September. And, we're there every Tuesday from 5 until 9 o'clock playing jazz. And that's just wonderful to play there in the summertime.
Nice. And I've also seen you at Bartini in Babylon Village right here down the block.
Yeah, Bartini's a great spot. They have a number of great bands that play there. I like playing there both. Sometimes the jazz group will play there, but I typically play there every couple of months with my rock band too. So, if you come down to Bartini and hear the rock band, you get to hear the music that's on the Kevin McLeod CDs.
Nice. We touched on this off the podcast, but a friend of mine, Mike Nugent, was lamenting about the era of the tribute band, and guys have to make a living out there, but finding venues that are willing to do original music. We had it all the time back in the day, like in the 80s. There were a lot of bands out there that were doing original music. You're a little hard pressed to find it, but places like Bartini's that allow you to, and you'll do a mix of other stuff, some covers and what have you. But it's nice to find the places that do this, take the chance on it.
Absolutely.
Because that's the way you get your exposure. That's the way you get to collaborate with other people, and people hear what you're doing, and you get an introduction, and you never know where it's going to go, who you're going to get introduced to. So you've been very fortunate.
From my perspective, as we were saying before too, I always enjoy hearing an original band. Even if a band is playing a bunch of covers, I always, like, my ears perk up if they say, "Hey, we're going to play something that we wrote." To me,
Right.
That's where it gets interesting.
Yeah. It's amazing the need. Maybe it's a guy thing, I don't know, but the need to create. And deliver something that's never existed before, and having it touch other people is really great. So it's just it's kind of special. So my hope in the Long Island Sound, hey, we're going to discover a lot of things in this podcast, a lot of different types of genres and music. That's why I really appreciate Kevin having you on the program, because of your diversity. Your diversity in writing and your diversity in genres is kind of cool. It's not always available in the people you meet, so I want to thank you. Anyway, I think we should leave some more for people to want more to the next podcast. Kevin, I thank you so much for your time. Do you have where you're playing next up, or we can post things? Yeah,
I would say look at the website, kevinmcleodband.com. I typically have anything for any of the musical projects I'm working on posted there. And, if you find a link over to Facebook, friend me or something, and eventually, you'll see, different alerts for whenever the bands are doing something interesting.
That's great. Again, thanks, Kevin. Really appreciate your time. And until next time, we'll see you soon. Be well.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Steve.
My pleasure.
Thank you for joining us today. I appreciate the time you spent with us. Please subscribe and comment, and visit us at gigdestiny.com. Till next time, be generous with your joy, keep your spirits high, and let the music take you on a journey. Be well. Peace. Thanks so much for listening. Please rate, review, and comment on the show. We really love to hear from you. And call our listener line at 631-800-3579. Again, thanks so much. Be well.